All right. Welcome, everybody.
Good morning.
My name is Goa. I'm the maker of SkyGlass. Really happy to have everybody here. Couple of quick questions first, just a quick audio check. Coming through okay for everybody? Video's okay?
All right.
All right, awesome. Got a thumbs up. Perfect. Okay, great. So before I get into the agenda, etc., I'm going to have to be admitting some people as they come in here. Hold on. Let's just enable everybody. All right, let's do that. Okay, great. Yeah, just the camera. All right, super. So by show of hands, first of all, if please mute yourself until you're ready to speak. And I do encourage everybody to participate, but mute yourself just so we don't get a lot of background audio for everybody. First off, just by way of hands, how about what platform? Are you Mac? A few Mac people and Windows? A couple Windows. Okay, so we're kind of split. And Alan and Emily, feel free to share your video so I can be interacting here with you guys. Okay, cool. And version, hello. Everybody's up to 1.16. Excellent. Good. Got a thumbs up. Great. Yeah, I was also going to ask, you can also use the thumbs up. If you know how to do that with Zoom, that would be great. Okay, great. And assuming, well, let's get a kind of a check on how long have you been a SkyGlass user? You within just the first couple of weeks? You're a brand new user? Okay, more than a month? We've got one new user. Okay, more than a month? More than a year? How many old timers we got? No? Okay, good. So we're pretty new to it overall. Excellent. All right, super. And all right, last question before we move on. Did you hear from me from Monkey Nation? Or are you, okay, we got monkeys in the group. Excellent. All right. Excellent. Okay, perfect. So, all right, so we've done all that. All right, so let me share my screen so we can just kind of go over the, all right, let me move that and share desktop one. Okay, great. And everybody reading that okay? Okay, perfect. Great. Okay, so for today, today is the intro to SkyGlass. For just kind of the beginners, this is the sort of the basics, etc. We're going to cover onboarding basics and logging in. We will cover the user interface in general, how to load traffic in mill mode and standard mode, how to switch modes. We'll cover how to change your home location. We'll briefly go over how to interact with the favorites location panel and add a favorite location. We'll do a very quick overview of traces, and we'll talk about the type list and the kind of basic functionality there. We'll do a very short dive into the watch list basics, and then ideally we'll have some time left over for Q&A. What we're not going to cover today are any advanced features. We're not going to talk about time travel mode. We won't talk about flight history reporting, and we will not talk about the database or the preferences. I'm happy to touch on those in the Q&A, but this, there will be live training sessions that will be deep dives into all of those areas that are not covered today at a later time. All right. Thumbs up. Excellent. All right. So let me close that down. All right. So format for today, feel free to give me a thumbs up or raise your hand if you have any questions, and I'll pause after I'm done with that segment, and then we can talk about, address your question. And again, if you want to, you're welcome to, I'll share, make you the host, and you can share your screen if that helps with answering the question. Otherwise, I'll just keep my share screen going, and you guys can see SkyGlass from there. Let's see. We've talked about mute already. Share your screen. Okay, good. All right, ready to proceed? Excellent. All right, cool. Okay, so here is basically what screen you're going to get to if you first launched SkyGlass and first entered SkyGlass for the first time. The assumption is, obviously, you've downloaded the install went okay. Your first action is to create a username. I'm assuming all of you guys have done that already, so you've gone through that process. Just for folks that may be getting this as a recording, you enter any screen name that you want, put in your email that you have used on the website, and then enter your password, click on create. That's going to generate an email with an activation link. Click on that activation link, which activates your couple-week trial, and then you jump back into SkyGlass and log in. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and log in now. And always nice to click on that auto login so you don't have to remember your credentials, and you'll just get blown right through this and get in next time. After you do log in, though, you will see how long your subscription or your trial is and how much time you've got left. So that may be helpful for people. And I'll talk about how you can get back to this screen later on. All right, so when you first enter SkyGlass, this is basically what you will be seeing. A few panels are enabled. You are dropped into mill mode, and the auto refresh is on, and a few of the user interface pieces are set. So the first thing I want to talk about is how to scale the user interface. There are a tremendous number of different screens and sizes and all that kind of formatting and stuff. So this is, if you look at the top of the main button stack, and the main button stack is in the bottom right-hand corner, this first vertical collection of icons. At the top of that, there are these two chevron buttons, and it's kind of a handle. Click on that, drag up or down, and that will scale the entire user interface. So I'm going to make it kind of absurdly large just so that everybody can see it okay. You know, generally I keep it down, I don't know, something more like this, but honestly, I scale this throughout my use. So it's a useful tool, depending on what you're trying to see, and if you want to reorganize some things in real time. So get used to that scaler. I'm going to keep talking about the main button stack here. I'll just kind of go down. First, you've got this sort of large button with an icon and a couple of rings around it. You'll notice that the outer ring, the yellow ring, starts to kind of count down. That's the auto refresh timer and the visual display there. And then the green ring, that is the sort of loading band. What's the how far it is in the loading process of the current load that you've got. We're in mill mode. It actually loads fairly quickly, but that will update differently depending on the mode and what you're loading. And then there's a big icon. So in mill mode, it's a nice little fighter. When you switch out of mill mode and into standard mode, that changes to a commercial aircraft. You'll also notice the mode changes also have a different background color. So in mill mode, we've got this kind of orange. In standard mode, it becomes blue. And then just to touch on a bookmark for advanced topic, when you are a feeder and you're looking at your feed, that will change color again. So it's kind of a visual indicator, a quick indicator on, you can see what your load is and what which mode that you're in, and specifically if you're in or out of feeder mode, which may be useful if anybody's a feeder. Is anybody a feeder? Raise your hand. Oh, cool. Couple feeders. Excellent. And if you want to know more about feeding, just ask that in a question later. We'll talk about it. Okay, so working our way down the stack, there is the next button is the auto refresh button. Toggles on and off auto refresh. I'll go ahead and turn that off now so you can see it turns white, and then that refresh dial goes to full white or full yellow. The next one down is the shield indicating whether you're in mill mode or not. So there's a couple of visual indicators, but this is how you switch modes to click on that button. I'm not going to do it now. We'll do that in a little bit later. Next is the trace button. So cover that now. If we click on a button and it requires a pop-out window, you'll see these pop-out windows start to populate to the left of the main button stack. So the nomenclature is we've got our main button stack, which is this first big vertical bar, and then this the main auxiliary button stack, which is here, and then all the pop-outs will sort of populate out to the left depending on your settings. So if you'll notice, I'll turn off the traces. That little pop-out here goes away. Okay, and we do have a couple of pop-outs automatically set up just so I could, new users could have kind of quick access to what is most common. All right, so I'll turn off traces. Next is a button to take a screenshot. Next one is the preference panel, which has a bunch of stuff which we're not going to go into today, but I do want to talk about one thing. So I clicked on the preference panel. We've got a bunch of stuff here. Please put your attention towards this saved preferences option. This first big button is really important. If your SkyGlass, if something goes wrong with your computer, and typically what will go wrong. So every time you make a change in SkyGlass, anytime you do anything, like if you make a change to a setting and move into a different mode, that is written out to a preference file, which is updated every time you make a change. And so sometimes if something goes wrong, that preference file will become corrupted and SkyGlass will either be erratic or just stop working altogether. If SkyGlass will launch and you can get to the preference page, if you click on that full reset button, this big burn, that will essentially delete the preferences file and reinitiate SkyGlass. All right, so a lot of people are like, oh, my SkyGlass isn't working, and they do a delete and reinstall. Sadly, that has no effect because it's not touching, that process will not touch the preference file. You want to do this full reset and then things get better. All right, so I'm going to close the preferences. And keep going down the list. So the other very helpful thing for new beginners is this this pop-up help button. And if you notice, every time I scroll on something, we'll see this little help window right above the user interface that changes every time you're above anything. And every button now within SkyGlass should have a pop-up help. So it gives you a quick description on kind of what the functionality of that element is. All right. And then this final button on the bottom, this is a quick way to just collapse all of the auxiliary buttons and all the type panel or the list panels that may be active. All right. So what I like to do if I'm sharing on social or something, I'll collapse this, take a screenshot, and then I can get a nice kind of clean thing, a clean screenshot. However, if you ever want to do a screenshot to send to me for technical support, it's really good that you expose all that so that I can see your settings and make recommendations, etc. Okay, so I'm going to work my way clockwise around the user interface. So we just kind of cover the basics. We've already talked about the auxiliary button stack and the pop-outs. On the lower left-hand corner, we have basically just some branding and something what I'll get into later. I'll be introducing more programs. There are some badges that are available to folks if you're a beta tester, if you're a feeder, if you're part of the Monkey Nation, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you want to be part of that now, you can direct message me and I will work the process manually. In the next version of SkyGlass, there'll be a little bit more automation to that and ways for you to pick your own, et cetera. But this is kind of a preview. The other one thing, though, is this SkyGlass logo itself, or the word itself, is a button. And when you click on that button, it enables and disables a sort of debugger. It started out as a debugging, readout for me, but it became popular and everybody loves to see like what's happening in SkyGlass. So what that does is anytime anything is running, it's going to update either what the last thing was or what's currently in action. So you can kind of see kind of what's happening and how fast things are going, et cetera. If I turn on the auto refresh, you can see that kind of happen. And anytime anything happens, it gives a little readout, et cetera. So that's useful, may be helpful for you. If you want to keep a nice clean interface, you can turn that off. For this purpose, I'm going to keep it on. Okay, moving our way around, the top left-hand corner is, there's a couple of different elements here. The top is a universal time code real-time readout, like what time is it, helpful for screenshots to kind of understand what exactly, when this was taken. If you have a location defined, it will be displayed here. I'll show you how to change locations later. And then right now, the default is CONUS, which is sort of center of the United States. So based on your home location that's set, it just grabs a quick general weather readout and puts that information there with a little weather icon. All right, so now moving to the top right, we've got a few different elements here, and I'll spend a little bit of time here. I refer to this as the HUD, the heads-up display. The top layer is basically the counts that are showing what the last load was, how many are showing from that load. And so you can interpret there, if it's not showing from the last load, it's not an active aircraft. It's something that's on the ground or not able to be rendered because I don't have a location for it. It's something like that. And then there's a breakdown, how many military traffic there are, the masked traffic, how many standard aircraft there are, and then there's an on-screen number as well. So right now we've got on-screen 410. I'm going to zoom in real quickly so we just see a couple on the screen. You can see that on-screen number automatically and very rapidly updates to what you actually are seeing. Quick note, when you're in mil mode, that loads all of the military traffic worldwide. Okay, so it's not based on a specific location. That's different from standard mode. So as you can see here, you can kind of by visually changing what you've got on screen, you can get a quick count of that. So over CONUS, we've got 403. If I zoom out and angle my camera to see everything, or mostly everything, now you can kind of see that the number of matching and showing on screen will coincide. All right, so let me get back to our sort of main mode review here and finish with the HUD. Okay, so the next, in the top right-hand corner, you'll now see a button as well. Clicking on that button will take away the heads-up display indicator of all the aircraft detail. All right, and you're just left with the detail that is around the pop-up when you hover over an aircraft. So I'm going to expand that again. Once you've got that enabled and you hover over an aircraft, then you get all this information. Basics. This is the call sign, the aircraft type, the transponder, the current transponder code that they're squawking at this moment. Then this next one is the aircraft registration, and I do a sort of a lookup based on the hex code of the aircraft and determine what country it is. So just so you know, the country is not actually reported to me. I do a decode of the hex code, which is this piece there. And that determines the country. The hex code, do y'all know what a hex code is? No. Okay, a few of you do. All right, so the hexadecimal code, it's a 6-digit code, which is unique to the transponder. It's sort of like your MAC address from your phone or the UUID on your phone. It's like the individual identifier of that device. The hex code identifies the transponder. Basically, it's the only thing that doesn't change within flights. The registration pretty much doesn't change, but the call sign can change. The type is reported by the transponder, so they can, some aircraft can turn that on or off. But the hex code is really consistent between every flight, every leg, etc. And for the most part, within SkyGlass, everything is sort of hexadecimal centric, meaning if you're in another app, the most efficient way is not to grab the call sign or the tail number, but to actually copy that hex code and then come over here, and then you can search on hex codes. You can add that directly into the watch list, et cetera, et cetera. So the hex code is a handy thing to sort of track and grab if you're moving around. I will also note, you'll notice that as I go to the call sign or the registration or the hex code, there's a little green box around it. Anywhere in SkyGlass that you see sort of a green thing either surrounding it or it changes to green and it's not just like a obvious button, that will put that information on your clipboard. So if I click on the AE, the hex code itself, now that hex code detail is on my clipboard, just so you know. All right, and then below this, we've got the telemetry of the aircraft, what its current height, altitude is, and again, that is in barometric pressure. Okay, this is not ground, AGL or something like that. That's actually baro, which can create some anomalies later, but we can talk about that when we go into standard mode. We've got the speed in knots. This is the indicator of how, what the altitude change is. So this one is descending 64 feet per minute, and that's a per minute indication. And then what their heading is. The left side of this HUD has, let me talk about this first. If there is a plane spotter image, and you hover over this aircraft, it will go out and grab that plane spotter image and show it here. So Plane Spotter is one of these fabulous crowdsourced locations, websites and services. Folks that are plane spotters, they go take their pictures and upload. So this is an actual aircraft that was taken, actual picture of this aircraft that was taken at some time, and you can load it there. You can click on that and get a little bit of a larger picture. And then if you click on the eye, that will go out to the website. It will load that web page for that at the Plane Spotter website, so you can get more detail or drill into that image if you want. All right. You'll see not all aircraft have Plane Spotter images, but most do, surprisingly number. Hold on. Got somebody waiting in the waiting room. Let me admit them. Okay. Perfect. All right. Welcome, Ronald. All right. So moving on, the extra set of icons, buttons here on the left represent different things that you can disable about that aircraft, and also some extra panels that will populate below in the HUD. So let me, I'm going to turn off the help, and let me reduce this a little bit. Okay, so you'll see one of them is enabled now, which is the location detail. So as you can see, as you move around these different aircraft, it'll do a lookup of the type. That's a little bit more in detail than just the BE-20, etc. The type and the manufacturer. Then it also does a lookup of like a reverse geocode of the location. So this latitude and longitude is 16 miles in some direction of Springs, United States, and that's the local time at that location. Generally, you're going to have a 1 mile northwest of this place. So if you can disable and enable those sub panels from here. The next sub panel is a little tower icon. This is going to populate with information about the transponder itself and a little bit more about the aircraft. This isn't as useful in military mode because most times you're just going to get NAs, not available. But when you're in standard mode, or if you've pulled from the watch list, it may have more detail. The source type will be what mode the transponder is in. If it's reporting in ADS-B or in mode S, if you're familiar with transponder technology and the different frequencies and stuff like that. It's important to note the different transponder types have different accuracies within this system. I'll take a small departure there. So this system is based off of feeders and the ADS-B exchange network of feeders. That's a volunteer network of almost 9,000 and growing individual feeders. I'm one. A couple of you guys are on the call are feeders as well. And that aggregates into a central hub, which is then processed and become available through API calls that SkyGlass accesses. The latency is incredibly low, milliseconds, honestly, which always blows my mind that the latency is actually that low. There is also a little bit of additional qualification, what they call in the ADS-B exchange world, MLAT, multilateralization, meaning that if there are multiple feeders in an area that is getting information from that aircraft, receiving from that transponder broadcasting, there will be a little bit of extra calculation to qualify the position, and that gets brought into the system. And again, this is all happening at sort of light speed. I mention all this because let's see if we can get one that actually has a RAD-C. The RAD-C indicator here is radiusum containment, and that's going to be listed in meters, and it basically is showing the position accuracy. Sometimes it'll be as low as like 15 meters, 75, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, it shows how far off that aircraft position could be in space. And again, that changes based on the transponder type, et cetera. Okay, so extra detail, may or may not be interesting to you, but it's there. The next one is the database. This will enable another panel. I'll go ahead and do it now. In order to have this enabled, it's got to load the database. So I'll go ahead and get that loading now. And basically it pulls up another window. Again, it's not as useful in military mode because the military never, it's just owned by the military. They don't ever show the actual owner operator and the detail about that. But when you're in standard mode or, looking at other aircraft, that may be useful for you. So I'm going to go ahead and disable that now. So that window goes away. We'll clean up our user interface. And then this last one is enables follow me mode for that aircraft. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but follow me mode basically just moves the camera and keeps that aircraft in the center while you're using SkyGlass after every refresh. All right, and to finish up this HUD, two top buttons, Crystal's coming in. The two top buttons are add to watch list, and this is run the flight history for this aircraft. And again, that we're not going to go into today. That is a advanced feature. All right, so just to make sure all the buttons are covered, clicking on this little X will just close. Oh, yeah, we'll close the HUD. If you hover over another one, it will still show again. If you want to disable the HUD completely, as I said before, we click on that button in the very top right, and that shuts down the HUD. All right, so let me go ahead and keep that up for now. And all right, so we've done the full round of the user interface. Now let's talk about camera basics. All right, so I'm going to hide the HUD and reduce that so we can see. All right, so and let me turn off auto refresh just so we're not getting any cycles here. All right, so when you're on the desktop version, the left button, drag, obviously translates the map around. Right button will rotate. All right. And let me move so we're not really seeing any aircraft. The scroll bar on the scroll on your mouse will move the camera in and out of the camera's central location. And you'll always notice that there is this little target, this purple target that's always in the center of the screen all the time, never goes away. Basically, that's telling you what the camera rotational pivot point is. It's sort of the center of the camera. All right. It's important because there's sort of two different zooms within SkyGlass. There's the camera zoom, which I'm doing here with the scroll bar, and then there's the map zoom. And you kind of have to use them both in coordination depending on what you're doing. All right. We'll talk about that a little bit more detail when I get into the jumper, but let's keep talking about sort of what's on the screen. So we've covered the basics of the camera move. Now let's talk about these aircraft icons. The jumper, if you look at the auxiliary button stack, this little bump, the icon here, that represents the jumper and it's enabled by default, which means if you click on an aircraft, it's going to move that aircraft to the center of the screen. Okay. If you're zoomed out, that may not be obvious. Okay. But if you move the camera directly in, you'll see, yep, that Rico 24 is now dead center and you'll notice that the camera indicator, this target, has moved to that aircraft position. All right. And the impact is that now that's your center of rotation. All right. So if you right click and move around, you'll see it's not centering on the map surface now. It's actually centered a little bit higher and you're moving around. Does that make sense? Okay, we got a nod. It's good. All right, so click on another aircraft. It's going to recenter. And again, this is all because the jumper is on. All right, so let's go check out this A310. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. All right, so when you hover over an aircraft, a few things will pop up based on the last aircraft that you are hovering above or have touched with your mouse. You're going to get this little green box around it showing that it's indicated, that it's in focus. And the same information that was in the heads-up display will show here, just slightly different format. hex is a little bit raised, but you still have the telemetry and the type and the call sign, etc. If you've got the database loaded, then you'll get this extra little bump on the bottom of what the owner operator is. All right. So other thing to note, the octagon you can think of as a compass face. All right. So depending on the heading of that aircraft, the icon, the profile icon, will be rotated based on its cardinal direction of this, sort of pseudo compass face of the octagon. That makes sense. So if we go to a different aircraft, you can see this guy basically heading west. He's pointed west, heading 251. He's basically heading east, heading 109. Making sense? All right. Awesome sauce. Okay. So that covers the basics of the icons. All right, let me re-enable the auxiliary button stacks and talk about these a little bit deeper. I'm going to turn off the debugging stuff so that this really looks like the interface that you're going to have. Okay, so again, this is what you're going to see by default when you first load SkyGlass. The auxiliary button stack is this large one next to the main button stack, and let's just sort of work our way up from the bottom. The map zoom is the first grouping here. You can use the buttons to incrementally go in, to zoom in or out, or you can grab this slider. Unlike many of the websites that are out there, this takes time to actually load all the tiles. So you shouldn't grab this handle and drag it, because that may slow things down in SkyGlass. Better you should decide, well, I kind of want it to go midway and just click, and then you'll see everything will start to repopulate and reload based on your zoom level. Again, keep in mind, when you're in military mode, the military traffic is going to load and render regardless of where you're looking, okay? So depending on what your mission is, what you're trying to do in SkyGlass, you probably want to be zoomed out when you're in military mode. So let me zoom out again. I'll just click that button, or click somewhere else in the slider. And let me do something to kind of cause an anomaly to happen. I'm going to click on this button, the increment once. Let's see if the map messes up. Sometimes what will happen is the map, it's behaving nicely now. Sometimes these map tiles will be a little wonky, okay? And they won't look right, or as you move around, they'll kind of flash in and out. Sadly, that's something that I've not been able to fix. It's a problem with the map plugin itself. So what I did is created this little reset button, and basically that wipes all the tiles and forces a full reload, which solves that problem. So if you ever see the map tiles wonky or something doesn't quite look right with the map, just reset it, and it's going to keep where you are in your map zoom, the zoom level the same. It's just going to wipe the tiles and reload them. All right. All right, let me pause here. And any questions? Anything burning, or should I just keep going? If you've got a question, just raise your hand. Or okay. Alan's got a question. Go ahead and unmute, Alan.
I was wondering if you can make your cursor solid white and bigger. It's a little hard to follow you when you move around real quick.
I'm very sorry. Okay,
yeah,
what
I keep losing track of it.
Yeah, I follow you. Apologies. I don't think I can do that, but let me see if I can make a change, which may make that more helpful. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to make SkyGlass a little bit smaller. All right, let me make that. And then what I'll do is I will share just SkyGlass. All right. Now, relatively, is the icon any larger?
Not really.
Not really?
No, you have to do it in your desktop.
Okay.
To increase the mouse cursor itself, which is a pain.
Yeah, on Mac, I don't think that's a very easy thing to do, and I don't think I can actually. I've never done it before. But you know what? I'm going to make a note of that, and for next time, I will try and make that happen. All right. Larger mouse. You know, that should be something that Zoom would do, honestly. Maybe they do.
Not to my
Okay.
knowledge.
All right, so I'm sort of back to full screen mode. Can everybody see everything okay? All right. Okay, so you'll notice something that happened as I moved to a different zoom level. The aircraft icons, the size of them sort of changed a little bit. And again, this is an important point on, you know, how to, when you're moving in around SkyGlass and you change the map zoom because you want to zoom in on an area or something like that. The size of the icons may or may not change, and you may have a hard time seeing them. So right above the map zoom, you've got this button of these vertical sliders. They're enabled by default. I'll go ahead and turn them off so you can see what goes away. Basically, we're a set of 2 vertical sliders, and this second one is the size of anything aircraft related. So in this mode, you're going to see the aircraft icons, the chevron, all that kind of detail will get larger, as well as the, you know, pop-up panels. If you have traces enabled and showing, those will also scale. Okay, so it's sort of anything, you know, that's been rendered that's not part of the user interface, that's going to scale with this second vertical slider. This first one is sort of the first real magic of SkyGlass. This is the height adjustment slider. Sometimes I call the relative height slider. Basically, this, you know, stretches and squishes the relative height, altitude of all the aircraft that are rendered. So, you know, if you take that slider and bring it all the way down, this is actual aircraft based, I'm sorry, actual altitude based on the map zoom level. All right. So one of the first things I discovered is, boy, when you're zoomed out and it's at actual altitude, might as well be a flat map, right? There's like, what, I can't see who's high and who's low. So created this vertical, I'm sorry, this altitude slider. And so you can immediately see, you know, who's up and who's down, and the different flight levels become, you know, incredibly obvious very quickly. Okay. Point being, so let's do this. Let me jump ahead a little bit. In this same row, we've got the slider button. We've got a button to change the map styles. I'll just do that one time now, just so you can see something change. Then there's you know, half a dozen or 8 different styles based on dark map, light map, etc. Most of y'all want to stay in the satellite map, so I'll bring that back on. And this final one here, this is how you change your home location. So click on this button and it brings up another slider with an input button here. So I'm going to put in Florida. I'm going to hit enter, and it's automatically going to do a reverse location lookup of whatever I typed in, and that can be almost anything. You can type in the 3 or 4 letter identifier for an airport, like SFO. It'll recognize that. You can type in a state. You can type in an address, you know, very specific, and it will do the reverse lookup of that and then move your camera to that location. Okay. Again, we're in mill mode, so the search radius is not important. But what I wanted to show you here is I'm going to zoom the map in and show you when you're going to want to use the relative height slider. When your map is zoomed in and the relative height slider is very high, you may lose aircraft which are really in the area, but they're, you know, they're stretched way too far off the top. So as I bring this down to actual altitude, now you can see this guy who's at 10,000 feet. Now we can, you know, see where he is and what he's doing. All right. But when you're zoomed out, so I'll do that again, click the map zoom out, and then wait for that to load. And then I'm going to pop this relative height slider, use my zoom on the mouse to back up a little bit. And then you can adjust your scale of the icons to kind of, you know, what you're comfortable and how good your eyesight, how old you are. All right. Okay, so that talked about the slider functionality here. There are a couple of other sliders. If you click on this button, you can pop them out. And there's a few things. If you want to change your mouse sensitivity, that's this yellow bar. And if you want to change if you want to adjust the barometric altitude, you can do the aircraft in mass using this. All right. And I won't go into detail too much here, but basically, if you're zoomed way in and you're like looking at an airport, Denver, for example, very high altitude, because all the altitudes are reported in barometric, you can get a barometric pressure altitude, which is lower than the field elevation. Okay, so sometimes you'll see the traces like go below the surface, because there's no way for me to, accurately look up the barometric pressure and do that calculation. Or at least it's not easy. I'm sure it's doable, but I haven't done it. Anyway, so this is where you can make a micro adjustment of the barometric pressure to sort of correct that anomaly. All right. If you click on the icon itself at the bottom, that resets it to 0, no adjustment. All right. So that's how you show and enable those other ones. Yes, Alan, go for it. Unmute.
On the barometric, is there any way to put in a specific number?
No, not at this point. It's a good suggestion. That's a good suggestion. The problem is that would only really apply if you're zoomed very far in. And the change in barometric pressure is very much dependent on the weather systems. Like there's no, I can do a lookup based on, where the nearest reporting station is and give that kind of a thing. And I could probably work out the calculation. I mean, it's just an algorithm or, a calculation to figure out what the barometric height difference is, blah, blah, blah. Every pilot knows how to do that, including me. But to do that across the country or over anything more than maybe 15 miles, you kind of lose the accuracy. So I haven't been able to, or I haven't implemented something like that at this point. The slider kind of gets you there. But I'll think about that. It's a good suggestion. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, because we're using in a very small area, and there's no local reporting. So, but we have our own stations here on the island, and that will help us. But if we could just type in a number.
Okay. Yeah, good suggestion. Thank you for that. Okay. All right. Where was I? All right. We've talked about all that stuff. We're working through the user interface, the auxiliary button stack. Okay. Any other questions before I move forward? I'm sorry that I have to kind of keep looking to the right, if that's where the your guys's gallery is. Okay, moving forward. All right, so we've talked about this next grouping here. We'll move up one level. This is where you enable or show the various list panels. We've got a type list panel. I'll just enable that right now real quickly. Then we've got the watch list, and then you've got your favorite locations. Again, that's another list. We'll go ahead and disable that now. We'll get into the we'll get into that a little bit later. Okay, we've talked about sliders. Okay, next one up is sort of the reset grouping. If your camera gets wonky in some way and you can't figure out how to bring it back to sort of, I can't see what I'm looking at, this square 2 arrows will reset the camera rotation and orientation. So we click on that. It's going to bring you back to the last home location, what I had defined as generally Florida, and then reset the camera to sort of kind of this general down angle. Okay. While I'm here, let me talk about the jumper. So you'll notice now we've got 2 icons, 2 targets that are aligned and co-located on the map. All right. When I've reset the camera, what it did is it moved the camera back to the home location. So let me move that over a little bit. You can see the difference now. The home location is this yellow or orange target. Okay. That's only going to change when the home location changes. The camera icon, which is always the camera target, which is always in the center. And then you've got the jumper. So let me double click on the map somewhere. And now we've got this jumper that just jumped back over to our location. The jumper has a bunch of different functionality. I love the jumper, Monkey's not a big fan of the jumper. He doesn't use it. So it's, obviously, whatever your preference is. I love the jumper. So let me talk about the jumper a little bit. A couple of things that happen when you double click on a location on the map. It's going to do first, it'll move the jumper to that location, move your camera to that location as well. And then it's going to do a reverse geocode lookup of that latitude and longitude. So I just happen to, pick on an unnamed road somewhere in Florida, et cetera, et cetera. And then it shows the latitude and longitude out to 4 or 5 degrees. All right. Maybe useful if your map is zoomed in and you're like, oh, what is this specifically? It's a very precise reverse geocode lookup. All right. You'll also notice that if I move the mouse over this large sort of teardrop, reverse teardrop icon, it turns green. If I click on that while it's green, you'll notice this orange icon will zoom over, and I've changed my home location using the jumper. Does that make sense? And now you'll see all 3 of the targets, the jumper target, which is this one in blue, and the location, your home location in orange, and the camera all co-located. So let me separate those out so you can see the difference. And again, just double clicking moves the jumper, does the lookup, and then clicking on the vertical target will actually change the location and do the readout. Okay. So, for example, I like to use the jumper when I want to let's pop over to Europe real quick. I pick over somewhere on the map where I can see, double click, wait for it to fill in, double click again. So this is like I can quickly move the camera, to a different location, pretty readily. That's kind of how I use the jumper. I don't use it too much on lookups unless you're zoomed in, then it can be useful, etc. Okay, you'll also notice that when you do a double click, it's, and I change the home location, and it locks that down. That's updated here in the top left-hand corner. So this area has been redefined as the home location, and that's what's on the readout up here. Okay. Oh, look at here. Forte 10, up and about, our favorite little drone. All right, so let me move forward here. Let's see, you've talked about the jumper. Okay, back to the reset panel. When you're doing anything in SkyGlass that, it's got a little bit of a load to it, whether it's, a large load of traffic, military mode is pretty efficient. So you're not going to see, we'll go ahead and put this back on auto refresh. Whenever anything is in process, you're going to see this little please wait pop, at the bottom here. And that's just telling you, most likely, depending on the function, you may not have good camera movements. It's actually saying, hey, SkyGlass is working on something, hang out, wait for it to finish, and then you'll get, you get all your responsiveness back. If the watch list is loading, you're going to get a larger bar. So let me go ahead and open up the watch list. And, I only have a very small watch list loaded. All right, pardon me for 1 second. I'm going to drop this back down from the load from the cloud. All right, so now I got a big watch list. So now you can see when the watch list is loading and it's got a lot of work to do, you may get this bigger bar. All right, let me do that again. I'm going to clear, load the watch list again, and you'll see this larger bar that populates. And when it's done, it goes away. Okay. So point is, if you've initiated something that's taking forever, maybe you've done something that was unintended and it's taking a very long time, you can arrest that load by clicking on the stop button. So as the pop-up help says, it basically stops all loading action. Okay, so this is kind of how you can stop something that's run away on you. This next one is the burn button. The small burn, not the big burn in the preferences, but the small burn. This is very useful. Again, when you're trying to kind of move into different modes, I want to clear all the traffic. Basically, it clears all traffic, all traces, anything that's been loaded, it's going to wipe off the screen and kind of reset you back to zero. I will note, if your watch list is open, The watch list reloads anytime after a burn. Okay, if I turn the watch list off and then do a burn, then I'm left with an empty screen. Okay, so basically nothing's going on here. And it looks like, oh, well, SkyGlass is broken, right? Well, no, not really. You've just cleared everything and you haven't wanted to load anything back up. So let's use that as an example. In the main button stack at the top, this is actually a button. This is a load button. So we're in military mode. I'm going to click that button and it's going to load all the military traffic. I'm not in auto refresh mode. So it's just kind of a single snapshot. Okay. When you switch in and out of mil mode, when you switch back into mil mode, the auto refresh turns on by default. Okay. That seemed to be kind of the natural progression for folks. So trying to save you a click, it automatically will go into refresh mode. I'll also note while we're here, at the top of the auxiliary button stack, you see this little loaded and a timer. Okay, this is basically telling you what the age of your traffic load is. Okay, so let me turn on auto refresh. And you'll notice we've got this other auto refresh pop out here. And the auto refresh by default is set to 15 seconds. I can extend that out to a couple of minutes. Okay, or you can bring it down to 1 second. And then every time this reloads, it's going to change, tell you how long that's been loaded. You can get SkyGlass ahead of itself if you turn that auto refresh down too low and you have a bunch of stuff enabled. Okay, traces are an example of that. So we'll get into that more in a little bit, but it's not that hard. SkyGlass right now is very open. There's a lot of functionality, and I haven't buttoned up all the cul-de-sacs and with the warning signs. I've done a little bit of that, but you can definitely get it into a place where it's like you're trying to do too much. It's trying to load when it hasn't finished the last load and stuff like that. So I like to keep the auto refresh at something sort of general manageable. 15 seconds is fine. Depending on what I'm doing, I may bump that up to a minute. Again, depending, so often unless you're looking at the field somewhere, you don't really need this supercharged auto refresh, but it is available. Anyway, so you'll notice that this timer will go. If you've got the auto refresh off, then you can kind of see, when was the last time I loaded this, and this will keep counting up. If your auto refresh is, let's say, a minute, let's wait for that to auto refresh and load up. Let's set it to a minute. If the load, and I turn that off, this loaded time will change color based on a multiple of whatever your auto refresh last was. All right. So let me show you, kind of give you an example. We'll move this down to 5 seconds. And then I'll turn it off, and you'll see once it gets about 15 seconds, it's going to start turning yellow. And then once it's a 4x multiple, it'll turn red, based on what your last refresh was. So kind of call your attention to, hey, depending on your last refresh, this is stale traffic. This is not accurate based on what you were doing before. Make sense? Okay, cool. All right, so let me turn on auto refresh again, move this out to something nice and easily manageable. All right, yeah, that should be fine. Okay, let's see here. Let me check my notes. We've talked about that and that. Done that, and that. Okay, let me briefly cover some of these other functions. This is the more advanced, button grouping. I'm not going to go into everything, but I'll just kind of give you the basics. Starting at the top right, to load the database interface and the database. We've already done it in this session, but that's this button here. This is another place to turn follow me mode on. We're not going to go into that now. This button here is the profile button. Basically, it brings you back to the login portal. Okay, so if you needed to do other functionality or check your, expiration date, etc., this is just bringing this back up. The functionality of this login portal will be expanded in the future. So that's just a way to get back to that. Just to give you a little preview, stuff that's coming, shareable watch lists within SkyGlass. So you'll be able to not just share, your watch list to yourself on a different device, but you can mark it as public. So this way we can do Monkey. We can just have him update his new watch list and we'll be able to get it within SkyGlass. There are messaging capabilities, friend list, all that kind of community kind of stuff. Incrementally, that's going to be rolled out in the future. And that's going to be where you access that detail in the portal, the profile menu in the portal. Okay. Next one is the declutter and label options. So let me turn off auto refresh and turn the sliders off. So we're just left to this one panel. Let me turn this up, make it a little bit larger. All right. So when you are in military mode, you don't have the aircraft classes filter enabled. Okay, there's no need for that because you're just looking, it's already sort of pre-filtered for military only. But the aircraft labels are listed here and with the different options. So let me click on him, bring him into the center. Reebok. Okay, so I'll make some changes. By default, only the icons of all aircraft are showing, and you can turn those off and on. If I turn that off, then we're just left with the different chevrons, okay? The chevron actually is the aircraft position in space based on the zoom, okay? So when you're looking at, a map that's zoomed in and you're on an airfield or something like that, the chevron itself is the actual position. It's not the icon. The icon is just representative, right, to give you the profile and the compass face sort of cardinal direction, etc. Okay, but you can turn on all these other things, aircraft type and the transponder code. And again, you'll see that every aircraft now is showing that information. Then you can turn on the call sign and the country and hex code. You can turn on the telemetry, and you can turn on the database if that's been loaded. Now, just so you know, the little bit of a, not an anomaly, but this sort of extra. So no country shows the owner operator of as their military, or no military aircraft have an owner operator per se. So what I've done here is just do a reverse geo, do the lookup of the country and then show, military of that country. So it's a nice way to kind of see, especially like if I'm looking at CONUS and I turn on the country, you can, and the database, it'll show the owner operator as country, and you can quickly see, oh, who's foreign over the soil, etc. Or when you're in Europe, you can really quickly see, oh, here's, this guy's Greece, here's Israel, Netherlands. You'll find some interesting stuff in there when you look at, mil mode and have that database enabled. Just for giggles here, I also like to, let me pop back over to CONUS. You can do that by dragging. Let me just do a little, use the jumper. All right. And, I'm not an expert on I can't recognize the icon as exactly what type it is, right? So I like to turn on the type and just go, oh, okay, now I can see where the C-17s are, and quickly kind of get a visual and, help educate myself based on the icon, et cetera. In the same way, you can look at call signs and get kind of information about that, right? If a case, the K-35R is showing NA, who knows what its mission is? If it's oiler, or, it has some sort of a fueler kind of a, indicator, you can kind of get some more information based on just the call sign. An example here, this PAT, priority air transport, right? So there's different ways, the different call signs can give you information about what the mission is for that aircraft, may be useful. So that's why I like to kind of, turn on the, let me clean this up a little bit so it's easier to see. Turn on the call signs and then kind of scan you know, and get an idea of what's happening, right? Okay. And, you know, if you're interested, the telemetry may or may not be useful for you, you know, seeing what's going on, but that's how you can turn them on for all aircraft on screen. Okay, take a drink. All right, so this is probably a good natural space for me to move into changing modes. But before I do that, let me pause for questions. Any questions? Go for it, Michael. Go ahead, unmute and go ahead.
So somehow I lost the box where you can turn on the labels, what you were just talking about.
Okay, great question. You can enable and disable that box using the filter button here, which is the top middle of the auxiliary button stack. So if you notice, if I click on that, then if something is hidden, it brings it up, which I have now here some extra. I've got an extra list here of the different aircraft classes. You click on it again, goes away completely. And because now there's no more pop-ups in that stack, everything kind of collapses. So everything kind of, you know, depending on what you've got going on here, let me turn on auto refresh, get the traces going, and bring up the filter. You can see, you know, things will sort of keep stacking up this little extra area. That solve your problem, Michael?
It did. How do you turn off the classes though? And if you just want to have that
what a great question. Perfect segue. I'm getting right into it now. All right. So, and again, you know, I think this is really where people get confused because of the different modes. When you're in military mode, this classes doesn't really make a difference. If your watch list is active, it may have an impact. So by default, all the classes are on, but the different classes are not, you know, they're not useful when you're in military mode because that class of military has already been pre-filtered for you. All right, so let me do this. Let's pick an area that's got a good, you know what, I'm just going to put in DCA. That's an easy one. All right, so I'm going to turn on my location chooser here. Actually, no, let me do it this other way. I'm going to click on the shield, which is going to switch modes, okay? Watch what happens. Click on the shield. A couple things are going to happen. First thing, it's going to do a burn because we've just changed modes. So it clears the field for you, okay? Next thing we've noticed is we've got the location chooser has been brought up. All right, so let's put in an area. And you'll notice, this is still from our last double click jumper was over in Europe. So that's why we're not seeing anything useful here. All right, so let me put in DCA, which is the Washington, D.C. airport, okay? We've got a green box that's showing the search radius, all right? And now I'm gonna bump up the zoom about midway. Wait for that to paint. If I zoom back out, you'll still see the green box, which is the search radius. I am working. Let me kind of get a temperature check here. Let me do a time check too. All right, it's we've gone an hour. All right. All right, I'm going to keep pushing forward. If you need to pop off, that's totally okay. I'd like to definitely get through the agenda, but I'm running a little long. Sorry, a little long-winded. In the future, what I was thinking about is having the search radius automatically resize to your map zoom level. What do you guys think? Good idea? Bad idea? Helpful? You're like, yes, do it. Hurry up. Why have you waited so long? Okay, so you will always be able to change the map zoom, but sometimes it's useful. Like, so let me get down to like 10, 15 miles. I'm going to keep zooming in. So we see kind of airport view of DCA. And again, I've switched modes, which means that all aircraft are going to be represented if it's, you know, within that search radius. Okay. The important point here is, this is where you can absolutely overload your computer. If your search radius is too high and you have all aircraft classes enabled, it will, it's not going to happen. Meaning several thousand aircraft, your SkyGlass is going to load up. It's just the nature of having three-dimensional. The game engine and your hardware just can't keep up. There's very few computers that can actually do like a worldwide load. Even though it's possible within SkyGlass, it's not recommended. It's going to really, slow you down. And again, you need to get out of that. You'd use the stop button to stop that heavy load action. But since we're only at 13 miles, that should be fine. I'm going to go ahead and reduce the height, the relative height slider, so we know that everything's going to be down on the ground. Bump up the size, and let's load the traffic. We bump up the size even more. Okay, and this is all the way down. All right, perfect. All right, so not as many aircraft as I expected. Let me move this out to like 50 miles, and I'm going to bump our zoom out and load again. I'd like to get some various classes in here so you can see. Okay, here we go. This is good. All right. So now we've got some purples and some blues. We don't have any military in here, but they would show up in that classic orange icon. Okay, so blue are normies. Anything that is not military and not masked is a normal aircraft. Normal aircraft will be most commercial flights, most private aircraft, your Cessna 172s, your Piper 28s, all that kind of stuff. Anybody that has not registered with the FAA to be scrubbed from the public view and made a masked aircraft will show up as blue, as long as they're not military, okay? So quick thing about masked aircraft. So there are two programs within the FAA that they're sort of pay to play to get you removed from public view. That doesn't mean that it's not, that they're not, showing up on radar and stuff like that. It just means that when the FAA releases data to the public, those aircraft are going to be filtered out, okay? ADSB Exchange does not have any contractual obligations with the FAA, so they don't have to filter. That's why I chose them as the source, and we can actually, and so again, through the crowdsourcing nature of ADSB Exchange, they have determined through process of elimination and other ways of those aircraft. There's actually been a couple of FOIA requests of the database, which have been released, so they can identify who these masked aircraft are. Anyway, so the masked aircraft show up with the magenta color. Everything else is going to be in blue, unless it's military, and that's going to be the orange. All right, make sense? Okay, good. So I think I've covered well enough the pitfalls of standard mode. So to keep going with the filtering ability here. So now that you are in standard mode and the filtering icon sets are up, the options are up, you can easily turn off all the normies. Click on this button and it's going to hide them immediately. Click on it again and it'll bring them back. Okay, same thing with military, same thing with masked. If I don't want to see masked aircraft, I click on it and they're all gone. Okay, so what I like to do, something fun, is to get into an area, turn off the normies and turn off military, and now you're just looking at the mass traffic. Let's turn on the database view for all icons, and now you can do a quick scan. Oh, look, Lasai's up. Here's our favorite snooper. All right, so you can quickly look around and say, look at all the owner operators based on a database lookup of those different aircraft. Okay, now this is where you can kind of get into a more expanded view, or maybe a military view of a specific area with this setup. As long as you've got the normies off, you're probably going to be safe loading any size of a search radius. All right, so now let me go CONUS. I'll do my map zoom out. I'll increase my search radius. Let's let SkyGlass to catch up to that. Okay.
While that's loading, what's the fourth filter?
Right. Emergencies. Okay. Any
Exactly.
aircraft can become an emergency, right? There are generally 3 squawks for emergencies: 7700, 7600, 7500. 77 lost comm, 75 hijacking, 76 general emergency. What's interesting, oh, sorry, let me load up some traffic here. Let me get this up. Let me get to center of the states and load. And let me adjust the height and turn off the database. There we go. Okay. There are, interestingly enough, more aircraft emergency types that can be reported in the system. Okay. I don't know how many of you all are pilots or have that experience, but the pilot in charge is the one that declares an emergency. So who's at the stick? They're the only ones that can do it. The FAA can recommend, but they can't actually do it. The stick person in the cockpit, he declares an emergency, he or she declares an emergency, and then that gets put in the system. The FAA, though, can have different emergency classes, which they can then assign. Hey, and there we got one. Which thing is that? Like this one, general emergency. Probably a 7600 would be the code. Let's see if we can get to that aircraft. Let me turn on the HUD. So just so you know, this is a button. This is pressable. If you click on it, it will zoom to that aircraft and load its information in the HUD. Yeah, looks like 7700. So it's general emergency. Maybe 7600 is the lost comm. I forget. Anyway, I've seen other ones. Unlawful is one that you can often see that would come up as an emergency. Nordo, no radio. That's a lost comm emergency squawk. It may just be general, but there are some interesting things here that you may find as this loads. Yeah, so if you don't want the emergencies to report, you can turn off this and then it won't show. The emergencies, oh, and you can see here, let me map zoom up a little bit so we get some more separation. You'll see that in the emergency aircraft, the octagon background will flash and the octagon is in red. So it kind of calls your quick attention to that's an emergency aircraft. The emergency aircraft can be any aircraft, regardless of the class. Okay, so if your emergency is on, like this one is a military, you can see with a profile icon color itself, this is yellow. As long as you have the emergency on, any emergency aircraft will show and will transcend the filtering. Even though we have the military off, we have emergency on, it pops. Does that make sense? Okay, great. All right, so, and this is resizable. If there's multiple entries, they'll list there. Let me go ahead and turn this off. Let me close it here. And yeah, so I was saying one interesting thing to do if you want to kind of get a sense of, let's look at all the masked traffic, you can go into essentially a masked traffic mode. You've got your search radius identified, you've got it out wide, you've got normies off, and the hidden on, mass traffic on. And now you can see what I found astounding when I first got this working. There's generally 3x number of masked aircraft to military. That blew my mind. I thought that was a fascinating number, or so many more than I imagined that there would be masked traffic. And again, all these folks have to do is pay the FAA, register in their system, and then on most other public services that have contracts with the FAA or get their feed, they're not going to see these aircraft or the military. Those are automatically scrubbed. Okay. All right. So again, you can do the same thing if you want to just look at military for a specific area. Define your central location, bump out your radius with whatever is appropriate, and now you're in mil mode, but in a geographic specific mil mode. Okay, so now let's get into the, I'll pause for questions. Any questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? first
I
off?
can.
Okay.
5 by 5.
So I'm seeing just a mill on that. What do you call that display there with the 4 icons? What do you call that space?
The filter. Yes.
Filter. Thank you. So I see the only filter is the mill shield. Why are we seeing a handful of these aircraft with a purple background and a red octagon? Are they
Well,
descending?
you guys are right on it. I was just going to get into the next. It's a perfect segue. Yeah.
Okay.
So, to answer your question, because this is a great time to do it, any aircraft that has been marked on your watch list will show up with this different background and different octagon border color. Okay. The internal icon color will always remain the same, right? Because you can have, let me pull up the watch list and you can see there's other aircraft that are going to load. Oh, looks like I only have mostly military on here. Anyway, so if you had some normies or masked aircraft loaded, in fact, yeah. All right, so let's talk about watch list, and then I'll flip the script a little bit. We'll do watch list, brief overview, and then we'll do the type list panel.
Can I ask another couple quick questions?
Yes, sir.
Back on and if any of these are too long, we'll take it away. On that Charlie Nancy Victor, that 4831 we looked at early on, I think those are what, Marines? The CNV are Marines. That aircraft type showed up as a B737/K35R. I'm like, wait a minute, those are two different types of aircraft. Why did it show up that way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know.
Okay.
That's what's being reported by the transponder.
Okay.
So that's coming from the transponder. Same with the call sign, etc.
Right. Okay. And one more last very nerdly question, top left, where you have your UTC. And maybe because I'm a vet, UTC I thought was usually displayed in military time, 24-hour clock. Is there an option to flip it? Or
ooh, that's a good point. That's a good point. No, there is no option.
Okay.
But that'll be in the next reversion. I'm going to do that. I like that. That's a great point. I think want to be consistent. I think that's a great point. So I'll make that a toggle.
Thank you.
24-hour option.
Stump the host.
There
we go. Not really,
for UTC. Hey, I love it. I love it. Hey, this is one thing I was so excited to be doing these live streams because, generally I'm doing these kind of tutorial sessions one-on-one. But I haven't done them for a while because there hasn't been a lot of technical issues. Anyway, I kind of lost my feedback loop, with customers. So it's great for me to be getting that kind of feedback. Great question. We'll do that.
I do have one more, and this might be a takeaway. I have two Raspberry Pi antennas. One's Flight Radar 24, the other is ADS-B. I think we touched on this when we did a one-on-one back a while. I've been so busy with my work, I've been away from this. But how do I take either one of those, probably the ADS-B antenna, and plug it into SkyGlass? Is that a takeaway? Because I don't want to stall you here.
I'll cover it really fast, just to kind of give you the preview, and then we can go offline if you want at another point. Basically, hold on a second. Let me resize a little bit, turn off the watch list. Basically, you go into preferences, and it's in this top middle one. Okay. You want to change from ADS-B Exchange internet feed to feed from local network address. And if it's the standard ADS-B Exchange image that's on your feeder, all you'll have to do is change that, and this local will work. If it's got a specific IP address, you can put the IP address in there. If you're off-site and not on the local network, then you can drop the Anywhere ID in here and use this third option. Okay.
Cool. All right, I'll check it out, and maybe one-on-one on the Discord. I'll blast you. All right, I'm done. Thank you.
And what you'll see is when you do that, you'll see that the background of this main load icon will change to magenta. So you'll know you're in private feed mode. Okay. All right. So where was I going after that?
Thank you.
You bet. We're getting into the watch list, right? Okay. So let me reorient a little bit. Let me go back to, let's do SFO. All right, I'm going to reduce the search radius a little bit. I'm going to cover one other little feature. You'll notice in the auxiliary button stack, let me turn off the pop-up help so we can see this a little bit easier. Turn off the HUD. Okay, you'll notice in the pop-up, in the auxiliary button stack, we've got a couple other icons. We've got a low search glass, an eyeglass, magnifying glass icon. That's going to bring up the search entry box. The search entry box, you can search by hex code. Let me turn the back on the help. Search by hex, search by call sign, search by registration, or the squawk code. Squawk is interesting. So you could actually pull up all aircraft that are squawking 1200, which are the general VFR, right? I thought that was kind of interesting anomaly. You can actually pull multiple entries based on the squawk code using the search. Anyway, and then if you get a successful hit, it's going to give you a little pop out saying, yep, it was successful or not, and render that aircraft. So that's just a quick overview of the search. The sweeper is important. If the sweeper is off, then stale aircraft will not be removed from the display. Okay, so that can be useful depending upon what you're trying to do. And I'll talk about an example in a second. So when the sweeper is on and you're in auto refresh mode, if the aircraft position has not been updated in the last 3 cycles, it will be removed from view. Okay. So basically the interpretation is either it's gone offline, it's exceeded the search radius, so it's not getting a new position, right? Or something else. So it'll get removed. So let's, for example, say, why would I want the sweeper turned off? Well, if I were at a specific location and I wanted to see all aircraft that traversed my area, period, but I don't want them to like fall off the screen, I could turn that sweeper off, make sure my search radius was low, and just let SkyGlass run for 8 hours. And then I could come back and see every aircraft that had traversed that search radius. Make sense? That becomes more efficient when you're in time travel mode, which we're not going to get into here, but you can go into time travel mode, pick a location, and then turn on turbo, and it'll start accumulating all aircraft that were in that certain area. I did that when I did the Nord Stream analysis that you guys may have seen. So that's when you want to, the sweeper is useful in an off position. If you don't want aircraft to be removed, you want to see that it came through the area, you can have them accumulate that way. Okay, otherwise everything will be removed once it's exceeded 3x of the auto refresh timing. Okay, so we've got SFO loaded up. Let me bring the search radius down. I'll turn on auto refresh mode and you'll see this in action. Boom. First load, everything was old. It removed everybody except that search radius, okay? And let me turn on normies and zoom in a little bit. And since I've zoomed in, I want to just kind of touch my height radius and my sizes down so that everything kind of feels normal. All right, and now let's get into, so this is great. We got a nice variety. We got a lot of normies, we got a few masks, and we definitely have one military C-30J hanging out over the coast. All right. So we were going to talk about watch list. Anytime you're hovering over an aircraft, if I right click on that aircraft, it will add it to the watch list. So let me show you on this King. Let me click on the left so we'll bring it into focus. Right click, and you can see that the background immediately changed. So now it's on my watch list. All right, let me bring up the watch list. I'm going to, so most likely, I think the default of your watch list may have the extra buttons showing. This far right-hand button will turn off the sort of extra functions, hide the extra functions. So what I want to do is I'm going to do the burn button in the watch list header and clear my watch list just so we can, work from scratch here. So I'm going to, and it's going to bring up a warning. Hey, are you sure you want to clear your watch list? Yeah, I want to do that. clear, and it's going to, now it's eliminated everybody. So now if I right click on this C30, boom, he's on my watch list. You can see automatically populates. Okay, let me do that a couple more times just so we get a few aircraft here. We've got A36 or AS65. I'm going to put him on the watch list. Let's put a little mask guy on the watch list and click on a couple of normies. Boom. Got a little other military hiding there. All right. So now we've got some variety on our watch list. All right. You can see when you, so that's the most efficient way and easiest way to add to the watch list is just to right click on the aircraft. Okay. If you want to add manually, you can only do that with the hex code. So that's this plus button here. Click on the plus button, pops up this little extra window, add to watch list. You enter the codes here manually, or paste them from a different app, and then you can add from the watch list from the hex code. Okay, not the most efficient, but it's doable. You can also add to the watch list through database searches. We're not going to go into that now, but that's another way to do things in mass. But most likely you're going to see something, right click on it. Now it's on your watch list, right? Okay. Basics of the watch list. First, when you add anything to the watch list, especially via the manual mode and just right clicking, it's going to drop it into an undefined group, this unassigned group. Okay, and you can see that the group header is listed here as unassigned. Okay, and then we've got the different aircraft. Each of these are buttons. So if you click on it, it's going to, like you did with the jumper, it's going to move that aircraft to center stage and pull up the deets on it. So you can see we can just pop around the different aircraft by just clicking on its watch list entry. Okay. A little bit more about the watch list entry detail. The icon will show its class, normie, mil, or mast, right? As you can see here. You'll also get a little bit of a chevron or a little triangle showing up or down if it's climbing or descending. And then, of course, you have the aircraft icon itself showing there. Okay, the basic display of the watch list shows the default when you click on the aircraft is that it is labeled with its hex code. And then it shows the aircraft, I'm sorry, the next one is the aircraft call sign, the last call sign that was used, and then the type. Okay, so let's use this the C30J as an example. If I go to the far right-hand corner of this, of the aircraft watch list entry, there's a little I information. Click on that. That's going to show the database information lookup. If I click on the little edit, then I have some options. I can change what we call it in the watch list. So I'm going to say this is a heavy, right? Heavy lifter. Okay. And I'm going to click save. Now you can see I've just changed the listing that's beyond, what the call sign is, but sort of my label for it, heavy lifter. The call sign will update on its next mission. Next time it's flying, it may or may not, probably if it's military, going to have a different call sign, and it'll drop it in here. Most private traffic, your Cessna 172s, your private jets, they're always going to use their call sign as their tail number, right? It's commercial and military that's always rotating what their call sign is based on, Southwest Flight 772 or whatever. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So this is how you can give it a specific label based on, however you want. And then this is also the same area where you can move it into a different group. So let me do that as an example. It's assigned in the unassigned group right now. I want to say, well, let's add a new group. Click on the plus sign. We'll say this is my heavies and say save. And then it's been assigned to that group. I save it. So now you can see we've got a new group. That aircraft has been automatically dropped into it. And then everybody else is unassigned. Now, what you can do is grab the icon itself and drag it. Hold on, let me turn off auto refresh so we're not competing with resources here. Okay, I'm going to grab this icon and drag it into the heavies. So this is how you can quickly reorganize your lists by clicking and dragging, or you can click on the edit and then the drop down and move it. Oops. Save, and then it'll automatically drop into that group. Making sense? Okay. All right, a few more things while we're here. Basics of the watch list. If you want to remove it from your watch list, that's this banner icon with the minus sign. There's a little bit of a safety check here. If I click on it, what it first does is it moves it into a deleted group, okay, and hides it. It's not showing right now in view because it's been hidden. And then if you really want to bump it, then you can click on that button again, and it will be actually removed from the watch list, deleted from the deleted group. That's kind of just a save in case you hit it by accident. You can recover it by just going, okay, well, I can drag it back into the heavies, and now that he's back in action. All right. How are we doing on time? All right, we're an hour and a half in. I'm definitely over time, but if you guys want me to keep going, I'll keep going. Keep going. HW says all good. Classic last name, by the way. Love it. All right, hold on a second. Okay, so let me keep going. We haven't actually touched on traces yet, so we'll do that next. But just to keep going with the different watch list basics. So there's two view modes for the watch list. There is the standard mode, which is you're seeing the aircraft label, call sign, and type. You can change with this location icon here. If we click there and then reload, then it shows what it'll do a lookup of the last location.
I missed what you clicked on to do that.
Sure. It's the teardrop icon, the location icon in the watch list header. So it's this one that turned green. So watch list header, where it says watch list. And then we've got just a couple of different functions. It's this first one here. So let me switch modes again. Click there. It goes back to our label, call sign, type mode, or location mode, which still has the label and then the location lookup. Okay. Couple other things. If you only want to see what is if you only want to see what's flying, meaning what is active, you may have an aircraft that you've added to the watch list, but it's not flying, and you don't want to see those in the list. You can click on this icon here, which is toggle show only active aircraft. This isn't going to change much because all the ones that are flying right now are on our watch list. Meaning, I'm sorry, all of our watch list aircraft are flying. So we're not going to see a change. But if you've imported Monkey's List, for example, there's hundreds of C-17s and only a handful that are flying at any one time. If you want to condense your list down to something manageable, click on only what's flying, and that'll reduce the entry listings down to just what's flying. In the same way, you can collapse different groups by using these icons on the far right. So if you just want to see the different groups. All right, so let me do that. Let me load from the cloud, since I've already done that. Gives me an option to replace or add. I'm going to go ahead and add. So we'll keep these handful that we just put in there as well. All right. So in the watch list header, it shows the count, how many active aircraft of the total number that are in the watch list. This first button in the header, let me collapse the top header. First button is to reload or load the watch list manually. This is how to turn the auto refresh on for just the watch list. Okay. So this is how you can say, I just want to see my watch list, and be in auto refresh mode and not see any other traffic, you can turn this on. And when you do, you'll get a little clock readout here, which will time out or, count down. And then we've already talked about this one. That's just showing the location mode. This button is to turn on traces for everything in your watch list, sort of a show all traces just for the watch list. And let me clean up the interface a little bit. Let me turn off the locations, turn off the sliders, turn off the filter, and let me get the auto refresh off as well. All right, I'm going to burn, and then that's going to load the watch list up. Okay. So as that loads up, okay, so right now, all the groups are collapsed. You can see the chevrons are all pointing left, right? And now we've got two different colors of group header backgrounds. The bright colors mean, hey, you've got an aircraft that's active in that group that's flying. If it doesn't have any active aircraft, it's going to be that muted orange. Okay, so like, for example, there's no NASA birds that are flying, 0 of 2. Okay, let's say if I turn off the show only active aircraft and then I expand NASA, we can see the list of aircraft that are in the group, even though they're not flying. Let me give you another example. Okay, that's a lot of P8s. Okay, 2 of 3. Here, let's look at the heavies here. I'll collapse that one back. Okay, so now you can see in the heavy group, we've got 2 aircraft that are up of the 3 that are in that grouping, and you can see the difference. The stale aircraft or the not flying aircraft will be gray. The others will be in white, and they'll have an aircraft icon color established. Okay, if I were to turn off or turn on the show only active now, you'll notice that one just went away. Okay, so as an example, in the header, there's also a toggle which collapses or expands all groups. So now that we've have at least one open, it's showing down. So let's collapse all groups. Now everything has been buttoned up. If I expand all groups, now we can see, oh, I got a lot of stuff going on here. So this is maybe an area where you're like, oh, let me change the scale of my UI so I can see more in the list, and then open this up a little bit more. This, as you drag, it automatically says, okay, how many columns can I see? And then it'll start reorganizing the column and the listing based on how many columns you've got.
Can you pull that out to a different monitor? The watch list
No,
itself?
no. It's restricted to the window that SkyGlass is on.
Okay.
Actually, it's restricted to the footprint of SkyGlass.
Right.
Yeah. Love to be able to do that. That's I could probably do that in the future, but it'll be a while. That's a tough thing to do. Okay. Let me take a. Okay, a couple other little things that might be useful and functional for you. These little chevrons on the watch list will expand the watch list. Let me drag this down. It will expand the watch list to incorporate everything you can see. So if I click on that, it's going to expand it to just show exactly what's needed. If I, let's say, I'm sorry?
I didn't see what you clicked on.
Sure. So in the top right-hand corner, there's the resize handle,
Right.
okay? And next to the resize handle, there are 2 little buttons, chevrons. Let me make this a little bit larger, easier to see. 2 chevrons. Right. If there's too much to show, it's going to go full screen. And then this lower one minimizes the list, drops it down to just the very basic. So you just see the list here. Okay, so let me do that.
I just lost track of your cursor again. So.
Got it.
Thanks.
So let's say we collapse. I'm going to use the chevrons in the watch list header to collapse all the groups to their names. And then if I click on the maximize button, it's going to, again, figure out what's the optimal size for just what you have listed there, and change the list. As an example, if I make this whole UI smaller, now I can probably get them all in one column. Boom. Okay, let's see. There's some other functionality in the watch list header, which I can cover quickly. But let's talk about traces. Let's talk about traces. There are several ways to show traces. First thing you want to do is, if you want to sort of click around, you can enable traces from the main stack, which is this icon here. You'll notice that we've got a new pop-up that shows a slider with the trace depth. Okay, this is how far back in time from its current location to look back. And then there's a couple of options, all meaning show me traces for everything that's loaded. And then there's a keep, meaning do you want to maintain the length of the trace, or do you want to, meaning keep it at 30 minutes, let's say, or do you want to just have it accumulate over time as an option? So if you have traces enabled and you click on any aircraft, it's going to go and try and load that trace. And this guy's doing, looks like pattern work, probably off of a carrier, I would guess, right? Because he's off on out in the ocean somewhere. If I click on this PA30, we'll see his trace. Let me minimize the watch list. And I'm going to bring up the sliders, the vertical sliders, and increase the size. And you can see that the trace thickness is also changing. All right, so again, traces, I can just click around and it's going to, paint those traces. You can also, let me bring this slider down so we're seeing everything. Okay, you can also adjust the length of the trace dynamically, and it'll basically clear them and re-query for that new length. So you can see this one out here, the C-17 is going to get longer if I go to 3 hours. Boop. And then you can go as far as 24 hours. All right, so in the same way, anytime that you see that trace icon, you can show traces for, let's say, that entire group. If you click on the trace icon in the header of that group, or you can click on the watch list entry and show that. So let's pop over to the C6 or the E6. And I moved my camera to that location by clicking on the entry itself. And then I'm going to paint the trace for it by choosing that. And now we've got the trace. Make that a little bit thicker. Okay. Anytime that you see one of those icons, depending on the context, it'll run the traces. And then, again, that's a toggle. So click on it again, and it's going to remove the trace. Click on the aircraft itself, paint the trace, click on it again, remove the trace. If you have lots of traces and you want to disable them all, just turn traces off, and it'll clear all the traces. All right. So let me, what is the next good step here? All right, so I'm going to zoom out so we see all aircraft that are sort of, over CONUS. That's good. I'm going to bump the slider back up, reduce this a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to turn traces back on, and I'm going to turn all on. Actually, first thing I'm going to do is reduce this slider to, let's say, 30 minutes. I'm going to click on all. It's going to give me this warning and say, hey, this is a lot of traffic or a lot of data. Are you sure you want to do this? And say, yep. And now give it a second or a minute, depending on how much you've got, and it's going to go load all those traces. The height adjustment slider will adjust everything. Once you have a lot of data, this may get some lag. If there's no traces, this thing will be incredibly responsive, but you can see already it's kind of slow or slower. If this were out 6 hours, That's a lot more data to repaint every time. So it's going to be not as responsive when you try and move that slider. All right. Okay, so this is probably a good place to transition into the type list. So what I'm going to do now, I'm in my auxiliary button stack. I'm going to disable the watch list. I'm going to show the type list. And what this will do is it will group all of the types and put them in a list. It's kind of obvious. Let me make this a little bit easier to see. Get this into 2 columns and make it larger. Okay, great. So a couple things. Let's address the header first. And you know what? Let me go ahead and I'm going to switch into mill mode. So this will be a little bit more appropriate. And we'll get a little bit more of a variety of traces. All right, so we'll let that load. And then the type list is going to repopulate when that loading is done. Oh, oops. Okay, here's where I made a mistake, right? It's loading. I've got show traces all for 6 hours, and I just loaded 500 aircraft, right? So let me turn off the all. Depending on where you are, you may or may not be able to do the stop. So let me try and get the stop done. And then, yeah, Alan, I saw you got a question. Hold on.
Yeah.
All right. So this is where you kind of get stuck. You're like, oops, I put SkyGlass in a corner and it's doing a lot. All right, so I click on the stop. And I turned off the all, and now we're sort of more manageable. So now I'm going to reload the traffic. And that's going to update. And then once that's finished loading, you can see that progress bar going around the fighter. Then my type list will populate. All right, good. So now we got a lot of traces, types. Okay, let me pause there. Alan, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. In the future, is there going to be a way that you can, like the primary icon bar and stuff on the right, that you can scale it differently than the things you're actually wanting to read? Because right now it looks like it all goes together.
Correct. It does all go together. Yeah, that is something that's on my list to kind of do independent. And so to be able to scale the type list up and not everything. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Right now it's kind of a one shot wonder, scale everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point.
It starts to fill the whole screen and you don't see the mapping that well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
You bet. Okay. All right. So here's our type list panel. And let me express what's going on. So by default, it's going to sort them by count. All right. So right now we've got more text 2s up than anything, 64 or 63 of them. You can see it kind of reduces down. If you want to sort them by alphabetically, that's this icon here in the type list header. Click on that, and now we've got them in alphabetic, right? So depending, like if I'm looking for a Q4, and who knows how many are up, I move into alpha mode, and then I can quickly scan alphabetically and go, oh, there's my Q4. All right. If you're trying to get a sense of like, how many C-17s are up compared to, K-35Rs, et cetera, you can move it back into the count mode. All right. So let me reduce the size here. So we're just looking at the top counts. And let me tell you about some of these non-obvious functions. So the type list entries and the watch list have hide and isolate functionality. So let me show it to you in action. So let's look at the K-35Rs. If I click on it with my left button once, it's going to turn blue, the background or the border and the letters. And now in the field, I have isolated only those K-35Rs. Okay, you'll notice everything else went away. Okay, if I left click again, it's going to turn off the isolate mode and bring everybody back. And you can gang these up, right? So I can say, oh, let me look at the K-35Rs and the C-17s and the C-130s. And you'll notice all those 3 groups now are showing. Make sense? Okay, so in the same way, let me turn off the show isolate for C17s and C130s and K35Rs. Now here's everybody. So here's one thing that Monkey did. This is, you know, I saw what he was doing in the sit reps. I'm like, let me make this easier for him. So this is how you like pull the text twos out. If you right click on a group, it hides that group. Turns it red so you know it's hidden, and pulls it from the list or pulls it from the field. Okay. In the same way, let's do the T38s. I right click on those, and let's do the NAs. And now you can see sort of and you know, you can pull the EC35s, you know, anything that you consider like a trainer or whatever that you don't want to see. And then the on-screen list will still give you an update or, you know, a count of what's on screen. So that's kind of how Monkey does his in his sit reps when he pulls out the text twos, etc. If you right click again on that entry, it's going to remove that hidden group. All right. So let me bring the K35Rs back in isolate mode. When I click on any group, then we've got this new list that pops up, and these are actually all the different aircraft with their call signs. And you'll notice we've got some banners here. Anytime you see a banner with a star on it, that's related to the watch list. So I can add it directly to my watch list by clicking on this banner, and it'll turn green. Or you can remove it by clicking on it again. As example, if I am in the HUD and I have that aircraft listed, here's that, again, that banner. I can add it to my watch list. You can see it turned in the field, or I can turn it off. So anytime you see a banner that's sort of watch list centric, you can add it to that. Okay, and then again, these are all clickable. If you click on it, it's going to move the camera to that location of that aircraft. All right, in the same way, you've got some a trace icon here. Let me make sure my traces are manageable. We're at 1 hour. Let's make that 3 hours and turn on traces for that entire type list or type grouping. And let me adjust the size a little bit. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn the filtering options on and turn off the icons. So now we're just left with and let me reduce that a little bit. Now we're just left with the chevrons and the traces. So now you can kind of really see, ooh, cool, we got some nice traces showing here. Definitely got some refueling action over these guys, etc. Okay, so now you'll notice we've got some colors for in the traces, right? How do I adjust those colors? All right, so colors, when you first open or first install SkyGlass and launch, it's going to automatically just choose random colors for all the different types. And the colors are based on a starting and an end color. You can adjust them, excuse me, by clicking on the swatch next to the trace in the type list. Okay, so the trace colors are type specific. All right, so let's show the C30s, and let me show all those traces as well. Wait for that to populate, and now I'll change the colors. So we'll wait for the please wait to finish. Okay, so now I'm going to click on the swatch. It gives me this little option. So let me choose make these red as a start and yellow as an end, and you'll see them update in the field as well. So now those are changed. So now in the same way, let's do the K35Rs. Click on the swatch. Let's go magenta as a start and light blue as an end. And you'll see those have updated now. End meaning, let's pick a K35R. Yeah. End meaning it ends at the aircraft. Okay. So the last known position, that trace, that is the end. The start is the oldest trace position. That make sense? Okay. Okay, cool. So this is how you adjust the colors, and you can, take the time to kind of separate out, oh, my heavies are all kind of one color, The Monkey does this too. The lift, the refuelers are a different color, etc. And then you can get a sense of, where they were over time based on the color gradation. Okay, and then if you have a lot of things hidden and showing, and you want to just reset the whole watch list, you can click on this reset button there, which is the 2 arrows in a circle, and that'll just basically remove all of the hidden or isolated toggles and make everything showing. All right, so now I'm going to turn off all the traces so we clean everything up, and I'll bring the icons back and readjust. Okay, great. Hey, we've covered everything. Any questions before I wrap up? Thanks for sticking with me. We went 2 hours. I should have known.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Very welcome. Very welcome. DC, go right ahead. Open up your mute and ask away. So your mic is cutting in and out. I'm not getting any of that. You can repeat the question, or if you want, you can type it in the chat window, and I'll see it there. Go ahead. Y'all like all my branded gear? We've got coffee mugs, we have tumblers, we have t-shirts. All this is in the store on my site if you're interested. Always helps. All right. iPhone cannot get to accept my sign-in. Okay. Couple things, DC. First off, if you're using a VPN on your phone, you need to disable that, because that's gonna mess with the login process as a VPN. Next, you probably just have the either your username or the password wrong. So you can either use if you don't know your username, follow up with me. I'll give that to you. If you cannot remember your password, you can reset it either on the desktop or your iPhone using that process, or you can send me a text on my website and I can set it for you manually.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. You bet. Waiting on the Lord. Yes, I will be making this available. Not sure if I'm going to make it fully public yet, but definitely for those that registered, I will share the link to the Zoom recording. And I may, but for sure you guys will have access to it. Yeah.
Right.
I'll probably just make this available via my YouTube channel or online here. But yeah. Any other questions? Really appreciate everybody's interaction. Really appreciate your patience. Took me a long time to get these sort of things spun up to do these live recordings. So I appreciate your patience there.
Quick question.
Yes.
I forgot. I just asked you that question, but I didn't realize my microphone was actually working on my phone. So that's pretty cool. You mentioned you were going to have it available for us. I didn't hear the last part. You meant you were going to have it on your website, correct? On the SkyGlass website.
Yeah. So the videos tutorials, if you haven't seen, let me stop share and let's pull up a website.
This is me at work. I just have my cap on. I work in the medical field, so
I noticed that.
Yes,
cool.
I was able to listen to you while I was working, so that was cool.
Awesome. I'm glad you made it. Thank
you. A lot
you.
of information. Yeah, but you can thank MonkeyWorks for that one.
Awesome. All right. So here you can see, here's my desktop with the website, and
yes.
There's a learn now. And then if you click on just a learn now, there's obviously you can get to the live training information. And then there's the tutorial section here. tutorials. So this is a intro, so I'll probably put this in the basics. These are the long forms. Deeper dives, we've got some video tutorials on the features and specific, or long takes. These short hops are sort of single serving. So I just talk about icons, or just talk about a certain little thing. They're usually 6 to 8 minutes, much quicker, but you can find these there. All of these are also on my YouTube channel. So if you prefer the YouTube sort of interface, honestly, I think this interface, it's what my web provider provides. It's a little clunky. I kind of prefer the YouTube, being able to search through and stuff, but either way, they'll be there. I will be uploading this to the basics area eventually, probably tomorrow.
When MonkeyWorks is doing his little thing on his YouTube, he always has a little small picture of him, and then of course the whole screen is filled with what he's trying to show. I definitely love when he's able to zoom in, when he's trying to give us attention to something that's of importance. So that's awesome that he was able to do that. Yeah,
it's been fun. He's a good guy, and it's he really is deft with his use of SkyGlass.
Yes.
I will probably do a live tutorial session on like how he creates his sit reps and the various functionality. Time travel mode is also a very interesting piece. So the data goes back like 4 years.
Got it.
It's incredible. And you got to realize, and get this too, it's data every 5 seconds. There's a snapshot worldwide. So it's incredible data source. And with SkyGlass, you can go into time travel mode and just go into a certain area anytime with, let me get the specific date. Well, the full data, 2016, the data starts. We've got 5-second snapshots from March of 2020, so the last 3 years. And then most recently, actually, he's capturing higher resolution. So I will be in a future release, like traces, again, these are every 5 seconds right now. I will be able to pull traces, and I think it's like 10 times a second or something insane. It's going to be super high resolution traces, or high resolution in time. But again, you can go back at any point in this history and pull the traffic, scrub through the traffic, etc.
And I will say this sincerely, if you guys, I would even be willing to pay extra to have you and Monkey do something together. That would be the bomb.
Well, I appreciate that. He and I did actually do I did about an hour and a half of showing SkyGlass. That's in the basics location. So he may have me on again at some point. Maybe when I do another release, so cool. We'll do something cool. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Well, while you all are here, I'll go ahead and plug my Patreon. If you do want to contribute, and you're more than just your monthly subscription or your annual subscription or whatever, I do have some various Patreon level tiers that you can further support the channel, or me as a developer. I wear all the hats. I do all the development. I came up with the concept. I do everything except for the where the data comes from. That's all ADSBX, but all of SkyGlass and the website and all of it, it's all just me. And I really love it. It's super fun, but it is a lot of hat flipping depending on what I'm doing. So if you want to support me in that, to do what I'm trying to do and make it easier on me to keep expanding, then please see the Patreon page. The link to Patreon is at the bottom of every page, right there. Cool.
One more question.
Yes, sir.
You had mentioned, must have been at least a half hour ago, not a little longer. You mentioned something about certain things that are, when you're trying to do something in the program and you're trying to get all these things coming up on your screen, it's going to be very slow depending on the kind of computer you have. You said, and you mentioned something about there are computers that can do it, but I was wondering, do you recommend anything? What kind of processor would recommend that, or graphics card, or anything, the kind of computer that would really be able to do? Because when I watch MonkeyWorks, his stuff moves like flawlessly from one thing to another. He can pop up everything and it's there in your face.
Yeah, that's a great question. So interestingly enough, that's the performance of SkyGlass is more related to the graphics processor than it is to like the main processor or how much RAM you have. Minimum requirements is, you got to have at least 2-3 gigs of RAM. SkyGlass uses basically around 2 or more. But really it's like, if you're going to upgrade your computer, then you want to do it on the graphics card first. That's where you're going to see the biggest gain in the performance. And again, it's tweaking your, keeping it within the zone of what's useful. So if you're in military mode and have, Watchlist aircraft, a couple hundred, you're going to be fine. Once you start getting over 600, 700, things are going to start to slow down. And then that gets, exponentially larger if you've got traces on, long traces for all aircraft. Now you're really maxing out what's possible.
Got it. Very cool. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
I did have a quick question.
Yes.
I went on to Monkey's website and I got the email with his watch list that he's been mentioning a few times. And he also mentioned it's in JSON format. And I did a little snooping around on the internet to see if I could find something to, like a free way to bring that in. And I just can't figure, and I know you're trying to wrap up. So if you...
No, I'm happy to cover that. So when you get it from Monkey, like he said, it's a text file in JSON format. It's immediately importable into SkyGlass. So let me show you how to do that. Okay. That functionality is in the expandable header in the watch list. So there's the far right-hand corner, the arrow up, click on that. And then on the desktop version, you have the ability to export and import text files. And they need to be specific to the format. So meaning you can't just like cobble together a CSV file or a list by your own aircraft and say import. It's not going to do that. Anything that's been exported by another client can be imported. Okay, it's a specific format. Anyway, that's these two icons here, the folders. The blue one is what you want. Click on import and it'll give you the option. Do you want to replace the current one or add to it? Either one is fine. Click on replace. And then you just navigate to the watch list that you've downloaded. I've got a special folder set up where I dump all my watch lists for different people and different purposes. And then you just select it, open, and it will go through and add and import that list. Now, I'll tell you this. It handles duplicates. It checks to see, is it already in my list? It's not going to double add it. It will update. So if you've got an old list that has different groupings, the new entry will override the old one, but it won't give you duplicates. So it's good that way. I will also, one thing I didn't mention before, might as well go into it now. You'll notice there's an icon that has a magnifying glass with a plus sign in various places, like in this TACMO entry. So that refers to what's called a secondary lookup. Okay, when you load your watch list, some of this when I built SkyGlass, it was sort of dependent on, I built to what I could get. So there's certain API calls I can ask, and so I kind of built functionality based on what I could do readily, right? So I can ask the API in huge groups based on hex codes, or I can ask one by one. Obviously, the one by one takes a lot longer because to go through 1,300 of them one by one would take a lot of queuing and just take a lot longer. The problem is when I get by group, some aircraft will not pop, meaning the group query, which is the main method of loading watch list aircraft, will not include aircraft that are transponding with a Mode S, which are the older transponder styles. Okay, and just as a little bit of background, back in the day, the original, the older transponder technology was on a certain frequency, 978 megahertz. That was Mode S, and that it had certain information not everything. And then in 2020, that's when the FAA mandated that ADS-B, automatic dependent broadcast surveillance, that is what ADS-B means. That was mandated so that all aircraft flying in commercial airspace had to have these new transponders. That was actually the impetus of SkyGlass. I looked at the data feed and what those transponders would be reporting or broadcasting and thought, oh my gosh, drop this in a game engine and away we go, right? So that was the beginning of SkyGlass. Anyway, so there's a lot of data that is now broadcast with ADS-B, and Mode S has less data, it's less accurate. At any rate, the single query looking for specific one-off aircraft, it's a kind of a wider net. I can get Mode S aircraft. So point is, why is this important? Things like these high-flying anomalies, right? That Monkey thinks is these surveillance balloons, right? We don't really know what they are, that are flying at 80,000 feet or being reported at 80,000 feet. Those are always on Mode S, and you're not going to get them unless you turn on the secondary search. Secondary search will do, it will first cast the narrow net of all ADS-B traffic, and then it will go through and look specifically for those single aircraft if they're flying Mode S and render them. Problem is there's a trade-off on time. So anytime if you want to turn on, so let's look at the mil-intel balloons. I'll expand that group and turn off the show only active, and you'll see he's got the secondary searches toggled on for all of those aircraft. Okay. If you want to flip the toggle, you just click the one in the header and you'll notice they'll all turn white. If you want to clear all secondary toggles, secondary search toggles, it's in the expanded header up at the top left. You can see the magnifying glass with a plus sign with the international no symbol. Click on that. And now all of the secondary searches have been disabled. And now your watch list load time will be lightning fast. Okay. So that's how you can make it faster. If I load now, you can see boom, 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 done. Whereas the first time, let me load it again, clear. Let me show you as an example. I'll pull from, pull from Monkey's last published list. And you can see he's got a lot of things that are enabled in that secondary search, and look how long the watch list takes to load. Because it's doing hundreds of these little secondary searches. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I want to thank you very much for your time. It's been very informative, and now I have a lot to play with.
Awesome, good. So this was effective for people? Did this
Absolutely.
bring your knowledge level up? Excellent, good. Mission accomplished, right on. Very happy to do it. And the feedback has been fantastic. I really appreciate all of your questions, and you'll be surprised. Some of these will be new functions in the next version, which is exciting. Oh, while we're just talking about watch lists and uploads, downloads, all that, are you clear now on how to import your watch list?
I am, and I didn't realize it was going to actually go to my files and show me where it downloaded. So I just didn't play around with it. I was afraid I was going to mess things up.
No problem. Okay, good. So once you have a watch list established, you can use this cloud up and down to move it from one device to another. Or as you can see here, I could clear my watch list and then download my last one that I'd uploaded from the cloud back here. So this is how you get things to your phone or your Android tablet or whatever you've got, or move it from computer to computer the fast way. You can export it as a text file and hand carry it, right? Or you can just use the SkyGlass server. And again, this functionality will be expanded in the future. So when you upload to the cloud, you can mark it as public, and then there'll be a listing of public watch lists and people will be able to share them, etc. as we go forward. Did you have a question, HW? You're muted, sir. All good. You're still muted. I can't hear you. Still muted. Let me see if I can unmute you. Nope, I can't. I can only ask to unmute. There we go.
You.
There we go.
Thank you. The cloud function is the two open folders with the chevrons up and down across the top of the watch list.
No, they're the ones that have the cloud.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah,
Right.
and
Just left of them. Sure.
yeah, on your mobile device, you don't have the folders. You'll only have the cloud. Because
Okay.
there's no way to actually export to your device as a file. I haven't done that yet. It doesn't
Right.
seem practical. But yeah, on your mobile device, you'll have a slightly different interface. But you'll have those clouds up and down, and that's what you use. So on your
Okay.
desktop machine, use the cloud up, and then open up your phone, use the cloud down, and you'll be synced.
Okay. Now I'm still all I have is the iPad Pro. So I'm still without a desktop to work with. So I'm getting there.
Okay, are you clear on how to rotate your camera? That's really the only major difference in the
Yes.
user interface.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Oh, I didn't actually talk about how to raise and lower your camera. Now that we're talking about mobile, when you use 3 fingers, drag up and down, that's going to
Yes.
lower the elevation of your camera.
Yes.
Yeah, in the same way, when you use the option key and the left mouse, you can
Right.
raise and lower the camera that way. As another final note, there are keyboard commands to move your camera around. And those are the WASD, sort of the classic gamer. That's going to translate left, right, forward, back. And then the Q and E are up and down. And then the arrow keys are rotate. Okay. So if you're a keyboard hound, like I kind of like to do, or if you want to be super cinematic, you can use these keyboard combinations to do some really fun stuff and be very cinematically cool and do some cool screen grabs and recordings. That's how I do some of the stuff I post on social.
Yeah, that works.
Cool. All right.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, or I'll wrap it up?
None from me. Thank you.
Okay, guys.
Thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you
bet.
very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
You
Appreciate
bet. Happy to be here, and thanks so much, everybody. All right, I'll end it there. Cheers.
Okay,
Bye.
see you. Thank you.